Unpause it. Well, if you can't tell, I took the bowl off the chuck in preparation for this wet sanding. I think the one here, well, I'm going to show you this. I'm just going to put this on temp. Oh, here's the bowl. The way it looks now, it's the way it's looked for the last. There's the groove. I want to flatten this. This goes in 1/4 inch, 3/8 of an inch, so this is definitely not proud of this. The bowl finish, I just gotta knock this down some. But like I said, strategic mistake, and I can't actually do it while it's mounted solidly. So remount the bowl. I took the tool rest away, and I got to remember to fix my bottom depth gauge. Oh, crappy crap! Nothing fits. I want this tray under the bowl. But it's not necessary, so because we'll get to that in a minute. Let me show you this. This always gets people excited. Gets me excited. We don't need the high speed, so I'm going to slow the lathe down. Off, make sure it's off, actually off. Mission accomplished. That's 50 RPMs. One other thing to check. Set screw is locked, so it's prepared for reverse operation. So I'm going to show you, I'm going to wet the surface down with denatured alcohol. It will raise the grain. But more importantly, there's enough alcohol here. A natural finish should make it look like that. So it turns sort of a sparkly brown. Well, I know, a light caramel brown. You can see some chatoyance and grain coloration. So that should all just get better as we go to town. Okay. Interesting. This stain I thought was shellac. This alcohol should dissolve it. Not important. I wanted that plastic lid under the bowl to protect the lathe because I'm going to wet sand. So I just didn't want the wetness to get on the lathe bed. It's not a big deal. So I will use what I've always used, what I started out using. It's just plastic bag. And buckle it down with I use this color bag for more contrast. Okay. Once I get the sanding, I'll stop recording, but I don't know how I usually, well, you'll probably not see me sanding in the video. Because it's really boring. These are magnets. Okay. So I'm going to wet sand with sandpaper that's wet. My wetting agent of choice at the moment is an oil, and today I'm going to use mineral oil. This came from the grocery store. You can get it at a pharmacy. There's nothing special about it. It's USP lubricant / laxative. USP Pharmaceuticals. This is consumable, edible. It's just mineral oil. Nothing magic about it. I'm going to start with 240 grit. Could be a bad choice, but I want to start somewhere. What that will do will What the 240 will do, will get a lot of it smooth. There's no doubt about it. To a finish, like right here in this edge grain, flat grain, it's polished right now. There's just a little bit of roughness from pore to pore to pore, which may stay there. I don't know if you can see that little red mark. I'm just going to point it out. It's a little red flaring. There's another one there, but see the black dots? That redness seems to be exuding out like it was a piece of metal that's slowly dissolving inside the wood. It's the only one here. It's just interesting. So, I mean, it definitely looks like it's a stain spreading. Maybe that's what bacteria looks like. Anyway.
I'm not talking about debt consolidation. I'm talking about credit associates, experts in negotiating down credit card debt to a lot less than
Nothing magical about wet sanding. I'm going to do this barehanded. No harm in that. So I turn the lay speed down. I don't know, that's like tablespoon of oil. We'll see how long it lasts. The only problem when you're going barehanded is it's hard to wash this oil off your hand. Sometimes on a finish, I'll use shellac, and oftentimes we'll use a mixture of shellac and boiled linseed oil, which you can substitute other kinds of oils. So the first thing is to just, I've never done this big a thing, so I'm learning as we go. And did you hear the rag catching when I had the bowl rotating? That was in the grain that I rose when I alcohol wetted it. I need to get the surface all wet so that later, when I need more oil, it doesn't take much oil. I don't have to, I can just dip a drop or two of oil on the sandpaper. It doesn't take much. I may get an applicator. We'll see how it goes. The other thing about mineral oil, the reason I'm doing wet sanding is there is not going to be any sanding dust. The only fallout from it is going to be a sanding goo, G-O-O. And where I was going with the boiled linseed oil and shellac, that's a drying oil. Mineral oil is not a drying oil. It essentially evaporates. I mean, it is a petroleum product, and refined petroleum. So it's dead plant bodies or something. The thing about mineral oil is I can wash it off. Alcohol will wash it off, will raise the grain, but it will come off. You can leave it in the wood and apply other finishes on top of it. Mineral oil doesn't really protect it sort of waterproofs a little bit. That's where boiled linseed oil comes into play. But my preference is to not use boiled linseed oil. It's to use walnut oil. Walnut oil acts like boiled linseed oil in that it actually cures. It's a drying oil, it polymerizes. And it sinks into the wood. I've read accounts that it sinks in up to 3 millimeters and protects the wood from water there. I don't know if I'm being clear. I'm not really. I'm just jabbering. Okay. Now what I'm going to use is for a backing pad. I just need to start. This is a rubber stopper. And here's, where are you? This is a rubber stopper. Why is the camera way over there? That's a good angle. That's why. So I'm just gonna, it's just a sanding pen. What the heck? We all know why we use sanding blocks. This is the same thing. I don't like using just my fingers. See the goo? It's going about 200 RPM right now. So I get goo instead of sawdust. Oil, wet sanding has a lot of benefits. You could use water. Mineral oil is not a bad choice, except it's mineral oil. It's stinky. The first time I used it for this, in this enclosed space, yeah, it left me noticing. Enclosed spaces is a key word. So I don't use mineral oils anymore. Here in my little shop. This is such a gradual shape, I can switch to a different sanding block. On the inside, we'll get to that. So I keep dabbing oil on. When you use just your fingers, you can inadvertently put finger grooves in it, which is why when we do flat work, we don't really, we always use sanding blocks. Well, all that quarter ounce and a tablespoon of oil is really not in my container anymore. And it's in the rag or on the bowl. I'm trying to keep my left hand clean so I can operate the lathe. Yeah. Anyway, benefits. Another benefit of wet sanding is it cools the sanding down. So you can use a faster sanding contact speed. On a lathe, that means faster RPMs. The downside to sanding that I don't like is these old hands get real sore after session sanding because I'm gripping a lot. That's why I don't play guitar on my guitar anymore. I knew this was going to happen 40 years ago. I was a car mechanic, and I had symptoms back then. And did you see that big glob of goo go against, fly off of here and go over there? Another benefit of wet sanding, your paper doesn't clog up and lasts a lot longer. Like I said, if you get too much oil, the sandpaper is just more or less hydroplanes. Watch this. I'm going to switch to a different shape. It's a cup shape. This is a footrest, chair leg bumper. But for me, it's a hollow shape, and most of the pressure just bears on the periphery of what you're sanding. So it's how I get convex shapes to stay convex. See how hard it is to do this one-handed? I don't like doing a post-surgical wipe down on my lathe. Vacuuming's okay, but a wipe down, yeah. Turn the lathe too fast, your wet lube stuff will fly off onto you, the wall. This paper, the sanding blocks, the shapes, your hands, it'll all wash off with soap and water. So that's kind of interesting. You can wash the sandpaper off, and because it didn't really get totally used up, it's still good. Although admittedly it's cheap, it's a lot better just to throw it away. What I'll do is wipe this down with a rag, and when it air dries, well, once it's wiped off, right now, a minute ago, it has a lot of friction to it. So when you're dragging your hand over, it feels like drying paint. This white shape, it deforms a lot. It's not the perfect shape. That was not my radio station. The only computer back here is apparently this lathe. I don't even, well, maybe the furnace has some computer control on it. My drill press certainly doesn't. My grinder doesn't. Well, I have a pyrometer. That's computer operated. I have my moisture meter. That's computer operated. They're embedded computers. They're not desktops or laptop computers. you know, microwave type computers that are built in. Yep, that's my radio station. See the poo? See why I call it poo?
Does Morrissey count as a goth? I always think of the Smiths as being sort of gothy, but maybe that's not quite accurate. We ate it when our friends become successful from Morrissey. And Ahimsa, that's U2 and A.R. Rahman. New music from U2.
I have no idea if it's smooth or not. This is just the weirdest thing.
Support for WYEP comes from our members and from the Pittsburgh Symphony presenting PSL
Big chunk of poo down there.
Broadway. The performance by the PSL and a cast of Broadway vocalists includes selections from Les Mis, Hamilton, and Chicago. February 7th through the 9th at Heinz Hall. Details at pittsburghsymphony.org.
There's poo drops on the floor. By the way, this is a great thing in the shop. I mean, it's an unleaded container. It's plastic. It's crap. What's it? Oh, this is number 5. Hardly anything dissolves it, and you can see what this is. Yogurt. I must get, and depending if my daughter's in town or not in the house, I get at least one of these a day, maybe more. They're cheap, and they're really effective, and they're plentiful. They're just throwaway. I used to wash them, paint, reuse them. I'm getting ready to go sort of wash up. I want to wipe off the surface. I'm basically scraping down the paper. Because I'm going and clean up, I can get this in. Here's why I want to keep it dry. I'm going to pause it. Well, okay, I'm wiping down the surface. Paper towel. I've been at it for a few minutes. I'm just trying to basically burnish it so I can feel. It's not really shining, but it is what it is. I don't really feel anything or see anything that looks like tool marks. I mean, this, maybe. I mean, In a traditional, that's probably needs sanding. This cove area, and that's most likely. You see that goob? Pile of poo. There's a tool. Well, yeah, tool mark. So if you look hard, you can see it, see stuff. All in all, it feels really good considering I started with 240. The decision comes down to, is that going to get those tool marks out or not? Even back here, it's not so bad. What was that last piece I did? I did a piece of hickory before I did this. That was on the lathe when I first started. You may or may not have seen it. It's definitely in one of my other videos. But what I did there, I put the mineral oil on the inside, like before I had cut it. I mean, it had a shape, but it needed refining. And it cut just fine. I wasn't paying any attention to dust control, but what would happen would be where I cut, the normal wood color came out, where I hadn't cut, the sawdust accumulated as a powder on the uncut area. So that was fairly dark wood, hard wood, closed grained wood. So it was helping me cut. So anyway, enough of that. And you can see here. Can you see that? You can't see that. You're sitting, still looking from the back. But anyway, the oil's sort of come through to the inside over this edge. Not a big deal. There's a drop of it there. I don't know where that came from. It will penetrate through the wood. I mean, on that hickory bowl, the walls were thin enough where it penetrated pretty much all the way through, but I was using a lot of oil on that bowl. So I'm going to concentrate here. I'm just going to keep going at it. That's got to be marks. So I'm going to give up on a one-handed operation. Put my handy dandy cover over the lathe controls. So it's protected now. And I guess at this camera angle you can see the RPM meter. I don't know if it'll stay in tune, but it is what it is. So I'm gonna slather on some oil. I'm gonna go in reverse. And I'm gonna use this. No. I will use that later. Oh yeah, this one. I will use this. That surface is fairly flat. I'm going to use it to sort of level off this surface. So. Here's that, it's hydroplaning. When I bear down, it's cutting. Doesn't seem to be splattering, but not binning. I don't know, how's that saying go? The fool my mother raised. I think I can see as it's rotating, this edge of this rim is light colored. There's some streaks here, and then over here it's light colored again. So I don't know if that's the smoothness of the wood or what. It's not loading up too badly. I think it's getting hot though. This rubber block bends. Oh, this isn't the one I thought it was, but yeah, I can feel the grits going away. Okay, this is a ring. And it will conform. The ring is good because inside there won't be much tension on the paper. So it tends to smear the effects of pressure. Smear as in frequency smearing. Blur the spatial frequency. Instead of being a sharp edge, it's a blunt edge. Instead of the time domain, think of the spatial domain. Instead of time that way, it's distance that way. So instead of the surface going bumpity bump bump, instead of time going bumpity bump bump, think of the surface going bumpity bump. And it works out. It's the same mathematics. Same concepts. That's what image analysis is, except there it's in that direction and that direction. Motion, yeah, you got a fourth dimension, time. The mathematics are all basically the same. Hear that pulsating? Look, the sandpaper's not cutting evenly. That's the grain, I hope. When they're out around, they do the same thing. So it's really hard to distinguish sometimes. But when it switches from end grain to side grain, you get that. If you're doing flat work, it happens so slowly you don't even notice the sound change. You're really good with your hands, you can feel the difference. Like when you scrape a surface. If you're using an 8 horsepower motor to drive a rotating blade, you don't notice anything. My hands are not 8 horsepower. I was talking earlier about working on the back side of the bowl, finishing it, and I was going to have problems. On a smaller bowl, say 7 inches, 8 inches or less, I have a chuck that will hold that. It certainly won't hold this bowl. I didn't mean to be wearing this dangly old vest here. I wonder what wood's going to do. Burnish it, I guess. Incidentally, that was not the brightest move, reaching around behind a rotating part with a dangly vest on. I did take my necktie off. To me, the downside of working with wet is it's messy. Can't deny it. I watched a young lady yesterday turn an exquisite fruit bowl in pottery yesterday. Now that was a messy operation. I've never paid attention to pottery, but I watched her do this. Her hands were, and she was using this brown clay, so it looked like this poo is what she was making her bowl out of. But that was messy. She didn't even mention that fact. That goes with the territory. Let's see if I can demonstrate what this disc with the hole in the center does. There's another odd, not even noteworthy, just noticed. The poo will collect in there because there's less pressure, friction, whatever. The saw poo. I don't like to admit that I do shaping when I sand. It's part of the, for me, it's part of the product. So sanding changes the shape. That's what I'm doing here on this edge, and this edge is sort of just knocking off the edge a little bit more. I've taken away, like with coarser grits, a lot of wood, and mainly because of deep grain problems. Didn't cut the wood so smoothly, so there was a lot of tear out, in-grain tear out to deal with. I just couldn't get it with the metal tool, so I just sanded the crap out of it until it went away. And if you look at serious in-grain tear out, you'll understand. It can be pretty deep. Remember, one of my reasons for sanding this early in the process is so that if I remove a lot of wood, I want to know how thick the walls can be. If I do this after the walls have reached their final thickness and I sand way too much, I'll end up with a really thin wall. Okay, that's enough for the moment. I'm going to repeat that rinse and wipe process. And since this is already here and dirty, I'll just use it. What the heck? Maybe it'll get my fingers clean. What I can't do is wash the orange thing. I'll eventually do that. The orange thing being this Brillo pad, this plastic Brillo pad. I hope Brillo is a generic term in the public domain, like aspirin. It's not Brillo brand. That sounds like the Dead. A minute ago I thought maybe the song changed. It was I don't know. CRS. Old folks can't remember stuff. That's why I like the lathe. It remembers to go in a circle. And I'm pretty sure I won't forget that this piece that's moving right now will come around back there. I don't have to worry about it. I guess when it gets really bad, I won't even realize that's the same piece of wood. That little speck of wood there that's going around is the same piece I worked on one revolution ago. It'll seem like new wood every time. I think that's what those degenerative type diseases are like. I think about that way too much. Earlier I said the bowl was heating up. You don't want that. You can do that real easily on the lathe with sanding. This rubbing creates a lot of friction. What'll happen, you'll induce surface checking. Tiny little cracks in the wood. And I think it happened to me once. And I misted it down, I wet it down, and they closed up. But it's definitely not something you want to induce in your wood. It might be an art feature that you want in your wood. The problem with me talking is it screws up my editing. It's so boring, I can't publish it. Okay, that's good for now. I'm gonna go wash up. 26 minutes that session. I'm gonna try to turn this off. This tool is not contaminated yet. Okay, I just wanted to show you what the bowl looks like now. I sanded the outside. I just wanted to make sure it wasn't going to get any thinner. It wasn't going to get any more cut down. So that when I go to do the inside, I don't end up with a radically thin edge, thin wall. And I ended up, this is mineral oil. I sanded with mineral oil as a wet lubricant. It keeps the dust down. It gave it an overall brownish tint. This piece is the Limba it came from with no finish on it. So you can tell that there's a brownish tint to it. For what it's worth. I'll end up washing off the mineral oil more than likely, and that'll bring it back to its original light brownish color. I'm not sure what I'm going to finish it in yet. I sanded it mostly to make sure that there were no surface defects that I would have to sand down radically. And if you sand down radically, you could end up with a real thin wall thickness in places. So I'm happy now. Right here is the thinnest, and it's just finger caliper, still a good 1/4 inch, so it's not too thin. I swear there's no defects in it now. What upsets me most about finishing and sanding is I started off with 240, which is pretty fine, and 90% of the area, and more than 90%, is just fine. I figure there were 5 square inches maximum of tool marks, tear out, ingrain, misbehaving, that I had to sand down. There was a ring around here, around this surface, and there was a ring around this surface. A ring is how tool marks and generally end up looking, and tear out, ingrain, tear out. This is not ingrained, this is nice and flat. That always comes out nice. So 90 degrees away is where you get the most. And it turns out, I swear, there was only about 5 square inches that needed further sanding, coarser sanding than the 240. And that's what frustrates me. I figure there was about over 800 square inches on this surface. So 5 square inches out of that 800 is a very small fraction, but it's got to be done. So I had to go over the whole surface. I went down to about 120. I just started at 120 and worked back up. And I think the finest grit I used was 320, and it feels fine. But any more sanding will just be a surface prep, maybe up to 600, maybe up to 320, we'll see. But I just wanted to show you what it looked like now. So I'm going to zoom in and do a quick rotate, and hopefully the lighting is as good for you as it is for me. I do not know, so you may not see this. Yeah, there's the edge of the bowl, so you're seeing the whole edge. So if you see any tool marks, tell me. I'd really like to know so I can take care of them before I get done with this bowl. I still have the back bottom to do. It needs some cutting, and the inside needs some cutting. So that's about it. There's a big frown right here with stitches, stitching scars. Anyway, I don't know what you can see, but I just took the video just to be safe. Anyway, that's all for now.